Okay, well, let's get going on our coding. First thing we're going to do is let's set up some variables. So if we look at this, we're going to need to know a few things about the seats basically. So let's create a variable for the seats. And this is going to be an array of seats. We're going to throw in all the seats into arrays so we can loop through them and work with them. We're going to need to know the number of seats. To work with a few of the issues that are going to crop up. We're going to need to know which seat is selected, so we need a variable for, let's call it my seat. And that is the selected seat. And we are going to need a variable for the seat number. Because we're going to put that in there. And once everybody has loaded, when all the page is loaded, when the window has loaded, we needed to do window.onload equals init. We're going to call that function called init. This is not the jQuery way of doing things, but it works. Once the page is entirely loaded, we'll call that init. So we've got that. Let's go up, and this will all run the minute the page is ready. So we need to make our variables declared here so that they're global and we can access them in any of our functions, basically. So we have all these things that are going to happen at the program start. I don't mind marking this as happening at the program start. When you get a lot of code, it's nice to mark things. So program start. And we need to make our functions. So I'll copy and paste it. So we'll call this functions start. You generally want to put your functions that you're going to create at the top so that they're parsed before you get to using them. JavaScript will go through your code and look for functions, but it's always nice to get in the habit of putting those first. So what are we going to do? We need to create a function called init because we called it right down here, what's now line 13. So let's go up here and say function init and give our curly braces because it is a function. Give ourselves a little room to work. And I'm going to save a lot, so I'm hitting save right now. I've done enough work. Wouldn't want to lose this. So let's set up some things. So I put in a comment there called setup. And what we want to do is look for that HTML. Let's go look at that HTML for the seat that's picked. It's down here. It is line 40 in our HTML, which I believe I uploaded for you guys. So we have an ID of seat picked that's on this paragraph on line 40. So let's go and work with that. Let's say document dot get element by ID, and we are going to say seat picked, and we're going to look at that inner HTML property, and we're going to say this is all equal to no seat selected. That gives it an initial value, which is great. We could have put that in the HTML, but it's just a nice double check here. So what else do we want to do? We want to test and see if our browser supports Add Event Listener, because not all browsers do, especially old ones. If you're working with Windows XP, Internet Explorer doesn't support it, so hopefully you're working in Firefox. Windows 7 and Windows Vista that can run the latest versions of Internet Explorer do support it, but let's test and see. So we're going to run a test for browser support of add event listener. So let's make an if, and we're going to say if it supports the add event listener, we're going to do one thing, else we're going to do something else. So let's put in our curly braces for our if and our else if. So we'll test for if a document has, or document or browser supports add event listener. Well, the one best way of doing this is testing for the actual event, the actual object that you want to know about. The old way of doing it is saying, is the browser this? Which version of the browser is it? And that's a nightmare. You can set browsers up so that they fake other browsers. So the best thing to do is test and see if an object exists. So we'll test and see on document, does the add event listener object exist? If it exists, it'll be true. If it doesn't exist, it'll be false. We're not doing anything with it. We're just seeing if it exists. If it's part of the DOM structure, if it exists, then it will do this first set of statements. And if it does exist, we'll say this is a modern browser. So we'll create a function called modern browser. And if it doesn't exist, if it's false, we'll say this is an ancient browser. And we'll make a function to handle ancient browser stuff at some point. Initially, right now, we're learning event listeners, so we won't really be doing much for the ancient browsers. But for the modern browsers, we will. So we've got add event listener tested up here, if document.add event listener. Nice way of testing. Let's set up our two functions. We have a function for modern browser, and we have a function for ancient browser. And the only thing we really want to do for ancient browsers right now, or older browsers, is we'll send ourselves a message in console.log that, hey, it's old, it ain't gonna, we need to do other things. So we'll just say no event listener for you in the ancient browser. So if this test is unsuccessful, it will go down here to this ancient browser and throw a message into console.log, no event listener for you. And up here, for the modern browsers, we are going to successfully be able to add an event listener. So let's look at a few things there. Let's add our message, console.log, and we can say you can add an event listener. So we get some feedback here. Let's test this and see what happens. It's going to preview it in Firefox. It comes back and says I can add an event listener in console.log, so it's a modern browser. Life is good. If you wanted to, you could go up to the Tools menu and check out the DOM Inspector, see what's going on in this document, and just explore just a little bit. I'm opening up, let's see what's in the H1. There's some text, airplane seating chart. In our div, which has a class of seat chart, we've got 5 unordered lists, 3 of which have some list items, and none of those right now have anything going on. So it's an interesting exercise to see what the nodes are like in a document.